This week on Africa Weekly, we focus on the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is in the grip of an Ebola outbreak. And we travel to South Sudan, where, in the shadow of conflict, those in the remote regions of the country also live in fear of a lack of access to healthcare. But first, a summary of the stories that made the headlines this week. South Africans headed to the polls on Wednesday in the country's general election, in which the ruling ANC party has been widely expected to lead. The vote is the first electoral test of President Cyril Ramaphosa's bid to reinvigorate the party. 66-year-old Ramaphosa was elected last year after the ANC, which first swept to power in 1994, forced then-President Jacob Zuma to resign after a 9-year term dominated by corruption allegations and a struggling economy. Ramaphosa claimed the election day reminded him of the country's famous 1994 election, which saw Nelson Mandela and the African National Congress take power in the country's first multiracial polls, marking the end of apartheid.
Because in 1994, our people were just as excited as this, because they were heralding a new period, a new future for our country. And today, this is what I am also picking up.
Of the 47 opposition parties in the race, only the main opposition, centrist Democratic Alliance, and the radical left Economic Freedom Fighters were major players. The country's president will be elected by the winning party and sworn in on May 25th. But support for the ANC has fallen in every election since 2004, with anger over corruption scandals, sluggish growth and record unemployment. 60 people were killed in Niger after a tanker truck explosion near the international airport in the capital Niamey. The accident took place early on Monday as crowds had gathered around the overturned truck to collect spilt fuel. The driver of the tanker truck told investigators that an electrical failure caused him to lose control of the vehicle and its brakes. French special forces freed 2 French hostages who had disappeared while on holiday in the remote Pendjari National Park in Benin on May 1st. An American and a South Korean were also freed.
It's creating a bit of uncertainty, because as a tourist it's a bit scary that other people have been kidnapped in a park. And apparently this is the first time it's happened in Benin. You can feel the tension.
Pendjari is one of the largest remaining conservation regions for elephants and lions in West Africa, but just part of a far larger wilderness area spreading into Burkina Faso and Niger to the north. The badly disfigured body of their guide was found shortly after they disappeared, as well as their abandoned truck. The remains of nearly 85,000 people murdered in the Rwandan genocide were laid to rest on Saturday in a somber ceremony in Kigali, a quarter of a century after the slaughter. They were among more than 800,000 people, mostly from the Tutsi ethnicity, massacred over 100 days in 1994 by Hutu ethnicity extremists and militia forces determined to eradicate the Tutsi in Rwanda. The remains of those buried on Saturday were only found early last year, when 143 pits containing thousands of bone and clothing fragments were discovered beneath homes on the outskirts of Kigali.
25 years have passed, and I did not know where they were. Every day I was thinking and getting confused about where my dad was, but now I have found him and I have buried him.
Senegalese lawmakers on Saturday approved a constitutional reform to scrap the post of Prime Minister. The motion passed with 124 MPs voting in favour and only 7 against. President Macky Sall, who was re-elected in February, announced the plan in early April, telling the Prime Minister Mohamed Boun Abdallah Dionne to abolish his own job. Lawmakers also backed legislative changes aimed at preventing the president from dissolving the National Assembly, which in turn can no longer table a motion of no confidence against the government.
You wouldn't think it from the way she's returned to the front line of healthcare, but Eveline was one of the first victims when Ebola struck the Congolese town of Butembo. Now fully recovered and vaccinated, she tends the bedside of Ebola-stricken children in the town's health centre. An important part of her work is providing the young victims with desperately needed human contact. It's a role that psychologist Consolé also performs in 5-year-old Luke's life, alongside standard medical care.
This child is an orphan. His mother died of Ebola. We're monitoring his situation as he was in direct contact with her.
According to UNICEF, around a third of the over 700 deaths caused by the latest outbreak of the disease have been victims under 18 years old. It's therefore essential to raise awareness of the disease in the country's classrooms. It's a mission that Huguette, another Ebola survivor, has taken up.
Essentially, it's letting them know that the disease exists and that we must take preventative measures as it can kill.
One major obstacle is general mistrust of health authorities. Some Ebola treatment centres are now watched by armed guards, following attacks on 2 centres in Butembo and the neighbouring town of Katwa. But attitudes are gradually changing as confidence grows in healthcare professionals.
Ebola scares us, but people understand that it poses a danger and that we have to protect ourselves.
It helps that authorities are now trying to get locals more involved in the Ebola response drive, which many see as being led by foreign aid workers. According to the World Health Organization, the fight against the current epidemic could take another 6 months.
Nyachot is 2 years old. Just a couple of hours ago, he was convulsing from malaria. His parents made it just in time to this clinic in Udia, a remote village in northeastern South Sudan. The little boy has been sick for several days.
When I came to the clinic this morning, there was nobody here, so I went back home. When I returned, he was unconscious. He was shivering and convulsing at the same time.
Nyachot could be saved, but others are not as lucky. Horrific tales of war, rape and displacement have become commonplace in South Sudan, but for many, the greatest danger is often easily treatable diseases. According to the International Committee of the Red Cross, which runs this clinic, 70% of deaths due to illness could be easily avoided. This region of the Upper Nile is one of the worst affected.
Most of the children who die here, they die out of mostly 3 common morbidities, which is malaria, acute watery diarrhea, and respiratory tract infection, which progresses to pneumonia in the long run.
The Upper Nile region, which borders Sudan and Ethiopia, was ravaged by the war in 2017. South Sudan's infant and maternal mortality rate is among the highest in the world. Women do the lion's share of the work at home, often taking care of many children, and as a result often delay taking their children to the clinic.
It began with a stomach pain. All my children sleep together under one mosquito net. So if one falls ill, they all fall ill.
The clinic cannot deal with more complicated cases like operations or blood transfusions. The closest hospital is in Marban, which is a 3-day walk or a 5-hour drive away. But in Udia, there is only 1 car in all the village.
Authorities in Nigeria's city of Kano congregated in the city's central mosque to oversee the weddings of around 1,500 couples on Monday as Muslims began their month-long fast during the holy month of Ramadan. The northern state of Kano has the highest divorce rate of Nigeria, due largely to poverty, unemployment and cultural practices, prompting the state government to organize free periodic mass weddings to encourage people to marry. The body of Papi Fati, a recently deceased member of the Burundi national football team, arrived in Bujumbura on Friday. Fati died after collapsing during a league match in Eswatini, formerly Swaziland, this week. The 28-year-old, who made 28 international appearances, was playing for Malanti Chiefs on Thursday when he collapsed and was pronounced dead after being taken to a local hospital. That's all from us at Africa Weekly. Until next week.